Well, we're here with Adam Harris, who's the CEO and founder of Cloudbeds. Adam, thank you for doing this interview.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We just got done listening to you here at TechCon. You were one of the panelists on finding unicorns.
Yeah.
I liked your comment, unicorns don't exist.
I would agree. Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of entrepreneurial pressure to sort of establish these monikers. We often refer to ourselves as a donkey, hardworking, predictable to some degree, stubborn as hell, but still has a good kick. And, at the end of the day, you heard it from all the other panelists. We never built to become a unicorn. We built to build to our purpose and surround our team with that purpose. And ultimately, if it happens, it happens. My co-founder and I are actually writing our journey as part of a book deal that we got. And
great.
One of the things we talk about is like the definition of a founder is the sink or swim. And we think about that all the time,
Yes.
right? And so it's like, let's just keep swimming and we'll see where that current takes us.
That's great. I heard a gentleman from Forrester speak several years ago, and he said, we're not looking for unicorns, we're looking for thoroughbred horses.
That's right. There's many other animals to be.
Yeah, exactly. That's interesting. So tell us about the Cloudbeds journey.
Sure.
Just a brief recap so people who haven't heard know.
Yeah, so we're a almost 800 person team in 41 countries that powers hotels. We power every type of hotel you can imagine, and we're the operating software that enables them to do their day to day. We grew into a very crowded space at 1,500 competitors out there.
Wow.
And we're number 3 after having a really good sort of last 5 years. But, our journey didn't start with that idea. It was actually a pivot to that idea. We had an additional founder at one point in time, and we let them go. So we've had a lot of the peaks and valleys along the way, but I've been so humbled to be surrounded by what I think is the best management team and team in the industry. There's a reason why we're winning in many ways, and it's full credit to them. This is a team that shows up every day, works incredibly hard, and more so believes in what we're doing. That's so important in an entrepreneurial journey to have that support around that vision and purpose. But now we've raised almost $250 million. Well, actually $235 million in capital from some of the biggest names in the world, and who knows what's next. But we're going to shoot for the stars for sure.
You mentioned several interesting things. A lot of early founders are always nervous about some of the things you just mentioned, right? It's like, some people want to have the perfect idea right now.
Yep.
But as you just described, sometimes that perfect idea evolves. It doesn't, it's not, sometimes it's not what you start with. It's in the area you start with.
Yep. We have a philosophy, in Amazon engineering actually coined this, and so we've sort of taken it, but you have 2-door projects and 1-door project. 1-door project means the door is shutting behind you. You're in, you're committed. 2 doors are experiments. You can come back from it.
I see.
Product should always be experimentation. You need to get it out, you need to iterate it, and then you need to go find your product market fit over time.
Okay.
I think we as entrepreneurs are perfectionists and internal optimists, and the reality is it's incredibly hard to create category leadership. The statistics are against you, so all you founders out there, like it's 1 in 100,000 will get to the stage of any of the 4 of us were at or are at. So you have a better chance of getting hit by lightning. That doesn't mean you shouldn't start a company and you shouldn't do something that you love and are passionate by. But in the early days, just like raising capital can come with fear, it shouldn't be hard. It isn't hard, actually. You just have to understand the system. And then as you get to the next stage, it's a new system, and then you adapt, and then you do a new stage and a new system, and so on and so on. And I think the hardest thing for all of us entrepreneurs is it's very lonely going through that. And not all of us always have a board or shareholders that are super involved. And so depending on your experience, you may feel extra loneliness. You may feel less. And at the end of the day, it's a hell of a ride for sure. I had a full head of hair when I started this thing. It's beaten me up a little bit, but I wouldn't change any of the decisions that we made, even with hindsight, and because it led to something that we are now in. But You got to have grit and resiliency and be willing to take a few punches along the way. But the only way to do that is you need to have a team to lean on for those dark days, because they're going to happen. And, surprisingly, the more transparent you are with your team, the more of hugs you get from them when they know when you're having a tough time. And
Yeah.
They know something is going on behind the scenes. And so I've gotten to the point where I just share. I overshare, and I don't care what that represents.
So it sounds like there's two journeys that you experienced with Cloudbeds. The first one being the technology you end up being the main mover
Sure.
is not what you started with. And it also sounds like the team that you started with is not the same team now.
It's definitely evolved, and the best product doesn't necessarily win.
Yes.
It's the best system around that typically wins. So best go-to-market, best noise, marketing machine, best success story. And you've seen that. You've seen that in many industries. The what looks to be the slickest doesn't necessarily mean it's the one that ultimately prevails. And so from a product perspective, we weren't the best product when we first started. We were actually the worst product when we first started, but we just kept chipping away and kept making a little bit better and a little bit better. And that allowed us to hit milestones that then enabled us to raise capital, to give us the resources, to add the additional team members and so on. And that's where we grew.
So that's an interesting concept, because a lot of founders are nervous about, or they think that they have to get into something new and innovative and disruptive. But you got into a business that was saturated.
Yeah.
But you can, in a large market, you can make your way.
That's right. I mean, I look at this as a little bit of a puzzle, right? And our puzzle was really complicated. It was overly lack of digitalization. There was a lot of legacy belief systems. And so we're talking manager belief system, the way the hotels operate, they have blinders on. They just cannot look past. Even COVID, for example, you would think having social distancing would enable the self check-in app, right? Where I could just go to my hotel room without having a front desk. Well, that didn't happen. There was no catalyst to make us go faster. I mean, we are still in a world where 13% of door locks in our industry are digital, right? So how do I do a self check-in if I can't even communicate with the door lock? So moments that I thought would be these accelerants would move us forward in the right direction actually didn't do anything. It didn't change. It just challenged the status quo, and they kind of put their head in the sand. So we were fighting education. We were fighting institutional incumbents that didn't want to give up.
Yes.
We were fighting a lack of technology across the board, which made it very hard to bring many pieces of the puzzle together. And that's just a byproduct of an industry that's just outdated and behind. But that also was opportunity. And you had to kind of see through the big forest to see the light on the other side.
Yeah.
And we just started hacking trees down and trying to clear a path. And over time, it enabled us to hit milestones. And so I have some friends in the audience, but we've talked about my system of raising capital. I've always found raising capital to be very straightforward.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean it's not easy. It's challenging, but it's very straightforward. And the thing that we learned was venture capitalists tend to be herd mentality, right? There's trends, there's things that are the hot, AI, for example, there's valuations that come with things being, trendy or on the hot right now. And then you have the traditional, right? So take the bubble and move it over to the side. You have a very traditional investment vehicle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Venture capitals take money from someone else and they deploy it. And they need a return. Well, those returns are published. You can see it.
Yes.
The National Association of all Venture Capitalists and Private Equity publish their returns. Okay, well, if that vehicle, that asset class is, call it 17% historically or 12% depending on the stage, whatever you look at, you can work backwards to understand what their return profile needs to look like. And if you start to ask those questions and you start reading a little bit about that, you can write a model and build a business milestone around that stage of venture capital's need. And so when I was listening to the panel talk about early stage venture, they never mentioned any of that. They just mentioned, oh, this is how we're valuable. This is the things that we do. The reality is they're looking for a return. That's the number one thing they should be telling founders is, what is my return expectation? And if I tell my return expectation, the founder can then build a business plan around hitting that. And if you go and hit that, or at least get close to that, it will unlock the next milestone planning. And so then you can say, well, I need more capital. Cool. You can raise your next round of capital based on that milestone planning. And as long as it's defendable and it makes sense and it's clear and you can articulate that and the market would accommodate it, raising capital is easy.
Yeah, well, you've said something incredibly important, because I've seen so many founders go after money, go after people that have investments that are not interested in their area or are not interested in that size. And so if you target the right people and you have the right message, it's just like selling to customers.
Correct.
It's the same thing. You just got the right product for the right people. I mean, so what you said makes it sound simple, and it is.
It's relatively that straightforward. Getting the contacts, that's where it's harder. You have to work for it. You have to do your networking. You have to connect. You might have to go to an event that they're speaking at. But once you actually sit down and you have the dialogue, it should be where you soar, because you're impassioned by your product. You know your market. You know the product better than they do. And it's funny, in 12 years, 1,000 conversations, going to big organized like Goldman Sachs private company investor days, which is like you being stuck in a room this size and doing 40 meetings over 2 days. You've seen enough of this. Yes. And from my perspective, it's a game. I find it fun. I really do enjoy the hunt, but the hardest part early on was, how do you just meet these people? How do you get their attention? And there's many ways. There's friends and their networks. I used to be 6 degrees of separation. I think it's now 3.
Yes.
So you just need to ask 3 people to go and talk to anyone in the world, right? Like, that's not that challenging. Like, we all should be able to accomplish that. So, capital is probably the hardest thing for every entrepreneur, and it doesn't need to be that way.
That's great. Well, on that, we'll conclude. Thank you so much for doing this interview. Before we go, I just saw on your LinkedIn profile, you put CEO and all these great things, but you also put a comma father.
Yes.
I thought I haven't seen that on LinkedIn much.
I had an amazing father growing up, and he pushed me really hard, and no one ever prepared me for what it's like to have almost 5 and almost 2-year-old, 2 feral children that dominate my lifestyle at home. But I love them to death, and they've grounded me. They made me a better leader as a byproduct of having to be part of their coaching as they grow up.
I was the father of 3 children. I echo that sentiment. Yeah. Well, with that, thank you, Adam.
My pleasure.